Welcome everybody back to Boost Motion, guys. Now we're finally up to episode 4 on how to pretty much modify your Infiniti Q50 with the VR30. Guys, let's go jump into it. First thing, shout out to my whole Boost Motion family. You guys have been really rocking with me probably for the last 3 videos, and it's good to be back in here giving out these useful information because some of you guys are just coming into this community and some of you guys have been here for a long time. So I know that on my channel, I see that the community always tries its best to help each other in the comments and pretty much directing people towards the answers. All right. So in the last 3 previous videos, I told you how to look for the right Q50, right price, right mileage, and the protection and how to mitigate yourself in risk. Number 2 video was talking about the maintenance before modification. You have to do the maintenance before modifying your vehicle. I don't care what you said. So I went detailed on what to do. Number 3, I talked about actually modifying your Q50. All the prerequisites you need to do before you start adding crazy power to this vehicle. Yes, guys, I told you guys how to do that, and I gave the best steps how to do so. You can remove any step you want, but this is the best way to do it so that you don't run into any issues, because you're going to wonder, why am I dealing with this now when I did this first? Modify, do everything properly, because these prerequisites are now going to apply to this video. So in this video, we're going to talk about, guess what? We already made additional power on our stock Q50. We added the bolt-ons, the intakes, exhaust, and heat exchangers. Now we can choose to go a little bit more detail. We want to make even more additional power boost. I got all these modifications now on the vehicle. What else can I do? I want more power, right? So one of the top ways of making additional power based on the previous video is we made 450 wheel horsepower on our bolt-on Q50, right? Now we want to make some more power. Well, we'll aim for fuel. What are some of the things you can do? We're going to look for fuel. You can choose to go with race gas. But race gas can be quite expensive, but you could get tuned on race gas. That usually could increase your amount of power, 20, 30, 40 wheel horsepower, depending on the octane level. But it is quite pricey, and you're not going to daily drive this car on that. So what is another way that's something that's a little bit more accessible like race gas? E85. Now, depending on where you live in the world or United States, if you have access to E85 stations, this could yield you even more additional performance. Once again, another 30 to 40 wheel horsepower, because the tuner can pretty much change up the timing and other tuning firmware so that the car can react and make additional performance depending on these modifications. So this is where it's very important to make sure that, yes, you've got the modifications done. If you try to add E85 to your Q50 and you still on stock exhaust, you'll get a bump in power, but you still have a restrictive exhaust and heat exchangers and stuff. That's why these prerequisites are important. So check that last video, because I don't want to hear from that I can't even curse at you. I don't want to hear about that right now, right? So if you have access to 85 stations around your house or around where you live, guess what? Now that you can actually add E85, there are going to be some prerequisites you're going to need here. The stock fuel system isn't going to suffice with fully 85. Because E85, I would say, is it less dense or more dense? The volume of E85 that's needed to make the same amount of combustion, let's say heat or power, you'll need about a third more of E85. So you're going to need a couple of prerequisites. One, because you need more E85 and the stock fuel system can't add enough fuel pressure, you're going to need a low-pressure fuel pump upgrade. You can check on my channel talking about low-pressure fuel upgrades. There's different companies you can go to, and there's companies now that are making some elite low-pressure fuel pumps for you guys that you guys can actually purchase. They may be quite expensive, but I'm telling you, these are one-time purchases that are going to be great, and you'll never have issues for a very long time. So that's the one prerequisite. 2, you're going to need a high-pressure fuel pump upgrade. Now, you're still on stock turbos, so you're going to notice that you can purchase 3 or 4 different stages of high-pressure fuel pumps for the Q50. Usually the smaller number means that it adds an additional amount of volume of fuel depending on price. But you're going to see one for, like, let's say $1,300. You're going to see one for $2,900. You're like, what the hell? What's this $2,900 for? Well, the $2,900 is for, I'll get to it a little bit later in this video. But let's say you want to do this on stock turbos. Remember, think about where you want to land, where you're headed. Where you're headed. So if you know that you now have done all these modifications to the car, you're like, you know what, I'm not doing turbos. I don't care to do that. I'm perfectly fine on stock turbos. I'm by E85 stations, and I want that additional 30 to 40 wheel horsepower. You can choose to buy the lowest stage high pressure fuel pump, because that will suffice on stock turbos. So now you have high pressure fuel pump, low pressure fuel pump. Then you're gonna need an E85. You're gonna need a flex fuel kit and/or E85 analyzer. Pretty much this lets you know the content of E85, and a flex fuel kit allows the car to change depending on the percentage of E85 in your tank, so that it can go towards that tune. When you get the car tuned on E85, well, let me finish it off. Yeah. So once you get all these components, there's different stages or percentage of E85 that will be in your tank, right? The percentage, you ever seen A10 or E20 at the fuel pump? That means that there's a certain amount of percentage of ethanol in the gasoline, right? So if you ever heard of like E30, that means 30% ethanol. E50, that means 50% ethanol, half and half. If you ever see E70, E80, you get the idea. So as you go up in the percentage, you're gonna need a high pressure fuel pump that can keep up the fuel pressure of that, right? So when the tuner chooses to tune you now, because that's the next thing that you're going to do once you're on E85, the tuner is going to tune you for different stages of the percentage of E85, because they don't want to tune you on E70, but you only get E50. The car is not going to run right. Or they don't want to tune you on E50, but you always have E70 in the fuel tank. The car is not going to run right. So you're going to want the car to have different stages for different percentage of E85 in your tank. Some people may not want to rock E50, E60, because as you turn the percentage up of E85 in your tank, your fuel mileage will go down, because remember, you need about a third more amount of E85 to burn, which means you're going down, like the gas mileage is already diminishing a lot more. So some people might want to just do E30 often, because they could put 93 and 30% ethanol. So they're getting not as bad gas mileage as before, but not like E70, if you know what I mean. All right. Whew. So now you go get the car tuned on E85, right? You can still do this on stock injectors, some people would say, but I'm going to put a disclaimer in here for the people in the community so that you guys know. When you usually install the high pressure fuel pump, you got to make sure you install it in a very clean area, free of contaminants that will get into the high pressure fuel line, because once it gets in there, it will cause additional issues, and it will stick an injector, and then your injectors will start, guess what, misfiring, and then you're going to have to change injectors. So it is still a good common practice, to purchase brand new fuel rails. Not a lot of people do this because they get away with it. Brand new fuel rails from the factory, and you swap those fuel rails in when you install the high pressure fuel pump, just so that you don't run into any issues, because AMS has done some studies, and people from what the general consensus is, the OEM rails break down over time, possibly because of the additional pressure in the fuel rail itself, and/or it could be during installation, and/or it even could be because what we found out recently, some of the fuel filters that are installed. Yes, we'll get into fuel filters a little quickly. Some people install fuel filters on the low pressure side of the fuel line, because they want the fuel to be clean. You want to get all the issues, all the stuff pretty much out of the fuel, so that it doesn't get into the injectors and clog those injectors. You don't want to run into those issues, right? So you'll install that stuff. You'll install the fuel filter, and what we found out is E85 is corrosive, so it could break down that fuel filter over time. So there is a service life to the fuel filter, which you need to change out. So I'll look more into that as it goes, but it seems that fuel filters definitely break down, and that stuff could get into the fuel rail and destroy your injectors later down the line too. That could happen, right? So, well, man, I'm all over the place. Hold out, bear with me, guys. So now that you have installed that, you put in the new fuel rails. It's also recommended that you change out the fuel pressure sensor too, because that gets a lot of buildup of gunk too, for whatever reason. Whatever gunk gets in the fuel rail, once again, this gunk is what goes out the injectors. If you get what I'm trying to say here, we don't know where that gunk is coming from. So it could be all tied into each other. So if you get what I mean, once again, we'll get better diagnosis over time, but it's 8 years with this car, so we'll know a lot more as we continue to build it while we fly it, right? So change that out, put that in, stock injectors. You tune the car on certain percentages, and you'll get a yield additional power. Boom. You did the modification to run E85 at a higher level, so you gain another 30 to 50 wheel horsepower. The car technically is running a little cooler because E85 burns a little cooler, and you have additional power and torque. And then you'll love the car at where it is right now. So you finally officially modified your car on E85, and here's the asterisk. Let's say boost, I don't want to run at 85. I just go to the track every weekend or every couple weekends. I'll buy the C16 or the race fuel, and I want to tune on that. Well, here's the thing. Technically, you don't have to do high pressure fuel pump for race fuel because it doesn't. The density isn't changed. It's still like 91. It's just a higher octane. So in some of those cases, it's recommended. Just do a low pressure fuel pump upgrade. Just do that. Because you don't want any drop. Now that you're going to be able to add an additional torque, that could bring down. You want to keep that fuel pressure leveled. You don't want to ever have any dips. So just go with the upgraded low pressure fuel pump and call it a day. And tune on whatever octane of fuel it is. You don't have to change a high pressure fuel pump. You don't have to do flex fuel or anything of that stuff. And you can have that additional power. And just make sure you drain the tank whenever you add the race gas in, and you're good to go. That's it. So when it comes to fueling, this is what you need to do as a prerequisite to add additional power on your pretty much stock motor, stock transmission, Q50 with intake exhaust, downpipes, and of course heat exchanger and stock turbos. So the next video now, we're going to talk about going with more power adders, turbos. All right. So outside of that, guys, you have a good morning, good afternoon, good night. I really appreciate you guys for your support. Definitely hit the like button, subscribe button with the bell notification, and definitely check on into my next video. So guys, let's go. Let's jump into that one.